Well, here we are. It is April 3rd, 2024, and in this video I'm going to talk about a sale that's coming up out in California on the 20th of this month. And I'm going to be away during that time, so I wanted to get this out there. And this has to do with an auction of books that's taking place. And if you are a collector of antiques and you have Asian art or any antique or art form, and you're not building a significant art reference library, I'll just say it, you're wasting your time. You'll never learn this stuff. You need books. I know a lot of materials available online. We provide a lot of material online, but nothing beats reading and having a good book and a specialized book. And the more specialized, the better. In the Asian art world, the generalized book, the general book of just Asian art, Chinese art through the centuries, or the history of Chinese art, or any of these books, they're interesting. They're tabletop books. They're fun to look at. They got nice pictures in them, but you don't learn anything. You learn by getting specialized books, books that specialize in porcelains of the Ming Dynasty, specialize in bronzes of the late Ming Dynasty, specialize in imperial robes of the Ching court, all these kinds of things. This is where you really learn. And there's an auction coming up out in California, and it's we just added it this morning to the global member pages and the Patreon account users. Is this sale right here, and it's being conducted out in California by Sunburst Auctions. And I don't know much about them. We've had them on before. They seem to be maybe a small auction house, something, I'm not sure, but they get some decent things from time to time. And in this sale, it's nearly all books. There are a few objects in there, but not many. And I want to go through some of them because there's some very good books in here. The starting bids are all either 10 or maybe a couple of them I think start at $100, but most of them start at $10. And there's some great books in here, and I want to go through them. All right, now. The first thing is in the front of the catalog, you're going to find a lot of books by Hobson, R.L. Hobson. Now, a lot of things that Hobson said were shown not to be true later on, but some interesting stuff that he wrote about and some very interesting objects in British collections and so forth because of his relationship with the British Museum, blah, da, 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 da. He was a big writer. He wrote a lot of stuff. But one of the books that's in there is this book, Chinese Ceramics in a Private Collection. And this is a great book. I've had this book. I think I still have it, but I'm not sure where it is, to be honest. But I went through the whole thing, and it has to do with a British collection that was formed during the late 1800s and into the 1900s. And he wrote a book about it, and there's some great illustrations in there. And the reason you want these is that many of these porcelains, you're going to see familiar faces. You're going to see porcelains in some of these old books that you've seen since in major auctions. The same pieces are still around to this day. So it's a very, very good book. The starting price on it is $10. It's estimated at $200 to $300, which is cheap for that book, just so you know. It's a very, very good book. And then the next one is the Illustrated Catalog of Chinese Art. And this was published by the Burlington Fine Arts Club in 1915. Another good old book. Some very good images and illustrations in here, jades and so forth. It's a general book, but it's well done. And it has some very, very rare, very desirable pieces that you don't often see anymore. All right, and then we're going to mosey along over to this. There's a big section. This auction has sections of lots of Buddhist art, Chinese furniture, Chinese porcelain, Chinese jades, all of it. Snuff bottles. There's a big section on snuff bottles. If you're interested in snuff bottles, you've got to have books. You just have to. You have to bite the bullet, and some of the money we're going to spend on objects, put it into building your library. You'll be very pleased later on. And this is a good book here. This is The Beauty of Huanhua Li. It was published in 1995, and it covers Huanhua Li and furniture from the Ming to the Qing Dynasty, but goes through it. And understanding and being able to recognize Huanhua Li can do very well. You can do very well for yourself, because a lot of times Huanhua Li wood is described as being Chinese pine, Chinese fir, all kinds of silly names, because they don't know, and they're just trying to guess what the wood is. And obviously, if it's a piece of Huanhua Li that's been misidentified, it may sell for a bargain, and you may end up with a great piece for a very modest amount of money. All right, and then over here to this is the 5 volumes, the International Snuff Bottle Society Journal. These are great books, and they have individual stories in here. People would write articles for them and so forth. It's a very interesting series of books worth publishing. These were all published Well, I think probably prior to 2000, I think most of these look to be, but some great, yeah, 1993, 1991, yeah, these were done in the 90s, but the information in them is excellent. And this is they publish some really great things, and as you can see, they have lots of illustrations in here, help you identify rare bottles and so forth that were collected back. A lot of these were collected back 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago. And then on to this, the 2 volumes, the Palace Museum collection of Ming and Qing Dynasty Imperial Furniture. Now this book is all in Chinese, but with a little homework, you can read enough Chinese to pull the dates off and so forth, and get the basic information. But what's really great about these books is that the illustrations are outstanding and will go a long way to help you identifying, in many cases, very unusual and rare forms of Chinese furniture that might slip under the radar in a local auction, in a country auction, something like that. People may look at some of these and say, oh, that's a late 19th century, a late Qing chair, and you find out, no, it's actually a late Ming chair. All right, and this kind of thing. This is a good set of books. $10 starting bid. It's got one bid. It's only estimated at $60 to $80 for the set. It's absolute money in the bank. And then the Journal of a Classical Chinese Furniture Society, and this was the spring '91 edition. There's several of their volumes in this sale. And if you don't know about the Classical Chinese Furniture Society, it was an amazing collection that was disbanded due to a fight, I think, as I recall, with the IRS over some sort of tax status. There was something happened with the finances that got them in trouble, and they had to liquidate the collection. And it was a real shame. It was one of the great Chinese furniture collections in America. A lot of the pieces were sold off and went into, again, great collections. But for a time, many of them were here. And these books are absolute gold. And they get into the real mud of all the details on construction, what you should look for, certain things. If you see certain things, you'll know that a piece has been changed or altered, and so forth. It's a very, very useful series of books. And then over to this. This is a book I have. I have a lot of the books that are in here, actually, but this is one that I have, and I like it a lot. And I got it at Border Books when it came out on a remainder sale. The Treasures of the Chinese Scholar by Fang Jingpei. And it's a really interesting book, lots of good illustrations, and it gives you a very good overview of the history of scholars collecting, because scholars collecting, as you know, is a very specialized category. And this book does a great job of focusing on it. And there are several other catalogs also in here along this line, and this is one of them. This is a great catalog. I have this catalog. It's the Robert Blumenfeld collection from 2010. It was sold 15 years ago. He had an amazing collection. He had a great eye. I never figured out why he sold the collection. I really don't. It was such an outstanding collection, but it's beautifully illustrated. This is a great catalog. It's got a lot of scholarly content in it, lots of good photographs, and very, very informative. It was done beautifully, and you'll see rhino horns in there, which you don't see anymore in any auctions, but you'll see lots of other objects, ivory carvings, all kinds of water droppers, ink stones, and all that good stuff. And, $30 to $50 estimate with a $10 starting bid. How can you go wrong? And then there's this, the Gerard, Mr. and Mrs. Gerard, the Hawthorne collection of bamboo. This was a Christie's sale that took place back in 2008, and they were collectors of bamboo carving, statues, brush pots, figures, all of that. This was I remember this auction. It was a really interesting auction, and it's in English and in Chinese, and there's some very, very, very rare birds in here, like this one. Some of you may recognize this. If you may recall, a few months ago, there was one of these that turned up in an auction online. I featured it on the global member pages and the Patreon pages, and it had a metal liner in it, and it was just like this one, and it was being sold by an auction house down south, maybe in Georgia, and they had advertised it as a bamboo water cup or something, and it ended up selling. It ended up doing very well. I had left some significant bids on it, and I didn't get it. And I think it ended up selling for $2,500 or $3,000, and it was damaged, but it was a really great one, and it was the twin to this one. And this one was estimated at $24,000 to $28,000, but the other one, the one that came up was damaged, so it wasn't worth as much as this one. But at any rate, this is a great little a book if you're interested in learning about bamboo. And there are a lot of copies of bamboo in the market. The bamboo market is full of fakes these days, so these kinds of books are absolutely essential if you're all serious. And then there's things about scholars' rocks and spirit rocks, as they're called. And this is a book about Japanese and Chinese spirit rocks. And there's some great sculptures in here. And if you're interested in this is sort of literati things. I love looking at them. They're like mountains in China that you see in the back of Sung paintings and so forth. Absolutely wonderful book. And it's beautifully illustrated. It seems to be mostly in black and white, but the black and white illustrations are really outstanding. This one isn't in black and white. It's just a black and white object. But I think there's a number of black and white images in here as well. At any rate, it's a great book. It's $50 to $70 estimate, $10 opening bid. And this one, Chinese Ivory, Chang to Qing Dynasty. I have this book also. This is a very, very good book on ivory. It's excellent. It's a fairly thick book and has broken down by period, style, type. They talk about the ivories that were carved and sent to the Philippines for the Christians down there during the Christian movement. So there was a lot of that going on during the galleon trade and so forth. Very interesting volume. Moseying along to this. This is the Herbert Irving collection, Florence and Herbert Irving. You may remember the Irvings, of course. They were the ones that, he was the founder of, he and his brother founded Cisco Systems, the giant food company, and he became a major collector, one of the biggest collectors of the 20th century of Chinese art. Part of his collection was sold, you may recall, at auction in New York. They had multiple days of auctions, the famous pig jade that brought millions, and they donated a significant portion of their estate collection to the Metropolitan Museum, and the Metropolitan Museum was given permission to sell some of them if any of the pieces were redundant, all that. But they were major collectors of lacquer. And this book was published back in the early 90s of the Irving family lacquer collection for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Met went to them and said, "We'd like to publish your collection." Of course, they probably wanted the collection given to them, but I suspect by then they'd already promised it to them. I suspect. I don't think this was something done to get the collection. I think they were already getting the collection. They wanted to get ahead of it and put a book out. And I suspect some of these pieces were already in the museum at that time. But it's a very, very good book on Chinese lacquer and Asian lacquer in general. And it's a really good book to know, especially today with all the fakes and the resin copies that they're doing that are very convincing looking, and that you can learn how to spot the copies. All these books help you a great deal in learning how to spot copies. And then there's this one, Later Chinese Bronzes by Rose Kerr. I've talked about this book a number of times in videos. It's a small book. It's a fairly thin book. It was published back in 1990. I got it when it was new. Has a very low estimate. This book is gold. This is a great book on later bronzes, Sung to end of the Ming Dynasty, and the beginning of the Qing Dynasty too. But they have lots and lots of information here. Rose Kerr, they included all of the research that's been done to try to understand when certain styles came into fashion, who were making them, what collections they were in, old Chinese collections that had early bronzes in them, scholars that had early bronzes in their collections and so forth. They're all in this little book. It's amazing how much she jammed into that book. If you don't have it and you like Sung to Ming bronzes, get this book. Absolutely get it. I've seen copies of this book for sale for $200 or $300, so the $40 to $60 estimate seems very reasonable. And then The Heaven and Earth. This is a very, very good book on celadons and porcelain of the Sung Dynasty. I have this book also. I can recommend it highly. It is beautifully illustrated. They give a full page of description to each piece and so forth. It is well worth having. I believe this is a paperback edition, $50 to $70 estimate. It was published 23 years ago. Makes me feel old. 24 years ago. I got it when it first came out. God, I sound like a dinosaur here. Jesus. And then there's this is the 3 volumes of the Topkapi Museum. This is a great series of books, and this was written by Regina Crowell and edited by John Ayers, 2 great figures, academics in the world, and of Chinese art and porcelain. And what this book series is, it's broken down into sections. So you have Yuan and Ming Dynasty celadons. Then you have Yuan and Ming Dynasty porcelain in the next book. And then you have Qing Dynasty porcelains. And these are all pieces that were sent to Turkey as tribute gifts and in trade, starting back in the Yuan Dynasty when the Mongols opened up all the trade routes out of China into the Middle East. And they sent lots of Chinese porcelain, as you know, to the leaders as tribute gifts, saying, we consider you a trading partner, we want to do business with you, you're our friends, have a big dish. And they would send these amazing pieces. And if you've ever seen some of the pieces that ended up in this museum, it is astonishing. It's astonishing. Some of the best pieces, some of the best porcelain in the world is in Turkey. Some of the best Chinese porcelain, and the estimate is $1,000 to $1,500, which is about right. It could bring more. The opening bid is $100. If you don't have this set, I have this set. Get it. It is worth owning. It is definitely worth owning, and it's beautifully illustrated. All right, and then moseying along over to this, China Trade Porcelain, Patterns of Exchange. This is a classic. This came out back in the 1970s. There might even be a free copy of this floating around over on the Patreon pages or on the reference section. But if you want to get the book, this is it. It's nicely illustrated. It's got good information on it. And this was back, this was published back when China Trade Porcelain was actually more popular in the auction world, in the dealer world, than Chinese domestic wares. It was all back then. It was all about export wares, China Trade. All right, and then moving along to this, Threads of Gold and Chinese Silk Textiles, Ming to the Qing Dynasty. It's a very, very good book. It's written by Paul Haig and Marla Shelton. It's a Schiffer book, well illustrated, footnoted, great pieces from collections, as you can see here. It's a very, very fine book. And this was published more recently, right? Yeah, it's a fairly new book. It was published in 2006. That's new. All right, and then this Crackware by Maura Rinaldi. Many of you may have this book already. The Moment of History of the end of the Wan Li period, the blue and white wares. This is sort of one of the Bibles on that subject. It's very nicely illustrated. They sold a lot of these. A lot of people got this book because it was highly specialized. It was a very, very focused book. And this looks like they got it. Okay, this was at they got this at Strand Books. Okay, I don't know if you know about Strand Books, but Strand Books is in New York City, and I used to buy a lot of books from them on when they were getting, especially back in the day, they would get remainder lots from art publishing companies all the time, and this was a Strand book, and this was probably back around 2000 they got this, and it was sold by Strand as a surplus book back then, for $89 a copy. So it was obviously a very popular book. It was published in 1989, and they had it in remainder probably around 1990 or 92. And the estimate is only $60 to $80 with a $10 bid. It's got some wear to the cover, but the content is the same. Dust jackets are the last thing you should worry about. But that's a very, very, very good book. And then there's this, China for the West. This is another book by John Ayres and David Howard. And David Sanctuary Howard, as many of you know, he's a dealer in England, a researcher. He handles the finest China trade wares there is. And they got together and wrote this book. Very, very good stuff, and lots of information about the China trade and the Dutch East India Company and how they got started and what they were doing, facts and dates, all that information it was done. This was published this was a long time ago, 1978 by Sotheby's Park Benet, back when it was Park Benet was added onto the Sotheby's name before it just became Sotheby's in New York. And it's a very, very good reference book. And this still has its original slipcover, which is kind of cool. So it'll probably do pretty well. It looks like it's in very, very good shape. It's a rare book. And then this, Imperial, 2 volumes, Imperial Silks of the Qing Dynasty at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. I have this set. I bought this when it first came out. And it is it's probably the best book published in the last 50 years on Chinese robes and Chinese textiles in general. It's unbelievably well illustrated. It's very well written. It is massive. And what's very interesting about this book is that all the pieces, I think, as I recall, when I read the history of it, all came from one collector who had bought all the silks back prior to about 1930, and he donated them all to the Institute. And absolutely wonderful illustrations. If you like robes and you're buying and selling silk textiles, you have to have this set of books. You absolutely have to have it. You will not regret it. The estimate is extremely low, $80 to $100. I've seen this book on ABE and other places, Amazon and so forth. There are dealers out there asking $500, $700, $800 for this set. Right now it's got a couple of bids. It's only up to $15. If you are serious about Chinese silks, and you don't buy this book or don't have it, you're really missing out. You're really, really missing out. And then over to this, the Possessing the Past, Treasures from the National Palace Museum in Taipei. This is a sort of a general art reference book of the paintings of Chinese history. But it's so beautifully illustrated. It's a very, very thick book. You'll notice at the top they said very heavy. This book is about that thick, and it has all of the great artworks and other objects and porcelains and so forth. And it goes into the museum collection and how it was gathered. And it's more of a deep dive into the history of the objects and how they were collected, as well as illustrating them all. It's just, this is a book you could sit and just browse and read. It's very, very good. It's like if you have the book 1492, Art in the Age of Exploration, another massive book, and has a big section in there on Asia as well as art around the world. It has that feeling to it. If you're familiar with that book, if you like that book, you'll love this book. It's a great one. And I've got a couple of more to do here. The Mayan Tang collection, volume 4, right here. Also by Regina Crowell. She writes a lot of stuff. I've said it many times. She's an unbelievable writer. This is the famous Chinese porcelain collection, art collection. There it all is. All the holy grails in the Mayan Tang collection. Estimated at $5,000 to $1,000, which is low. It's already up to $120. It should get up to $1,500 or so. It's a very, very rare set of books. But don't be afraid to chase it. It is worth every penny. It's a great set of books. And also, there are some books in here from Eskinazi Company. This is the 2002, the famous 2002 catalog, where you had the famous yuan fish jar on the cover, and then the Jing enamel jar. Very, very rare pieces, and so forth. This is, and Eskinazi was a wonderful writer. They do very good cataloging. Again, worth having. Information. It's gold. And then the last book is this. There are several volumes at the end by J.J. Lally and Company. They publish very academic catalogs, good catalogs, well illustrated. Here you have it. And Jun wears, and he was very extreme. He's not dead. He's alive. He's doing fine. He's real pro on Song and Yuan and early Ming ceramics in particular. He knew about all of it because he, of course, was the head of Sotheby's in Hong Kong. He was the reason. One of the reasons they do auctions in Hong Kong today is because Jim Lally went over there and established it back in the 1970s, and it's now. And then he handed off the baton, and now it's run by Nicholas Chow, the great grandson of Edward Chow, another great Chinese collector. But anyway, that's just a little backstory on Jim Lally, and he did an outstanding job at Sotheby's. He did an outstanding job running a gallery, and he finally decided to retire from the trade. So he did, which is fine. Everybody, after you put in your life at it, you maybe want to change gears a little bit. So anyway, this is just an overview of the auction. There's hundreds of books in here, and all of them are quite interesting, but the ones that are specialized are the ones that I'm going to recommend the most, the ones that you can read. There's something happens when you read information in a book in your lap and you're looking at the pictures and you can get into the story and you really learn it. You really learn the history, the facts, the dates, when things were made, why they were made, how they were made, where the materials came from, and so forth. It's absolutely critical. And all of these books are, as you can see, were the most recent one. I think this is probably the Lally catalog. It was published in 2009. Many of them are hard to find books. Many of them were published, back in the 70s, 80s, and so forth, when they didn't have an internet and people actually had to write books. But they are well worth it. And if you're not building a big library for yourself, you need to start. You really need to start. You need to commit part of your finances and your budget to building a library, building up a collection of good reference material for very specific periods, for very specific types and forms and so forth. If you're really, really going to get anywhere dealing with Chinese art, especially today with all the fakes and copies on the market, never before are books as important as they are right now. If you're serious about this, otherwise you're going to, people are just going to fill their cupboards with fakes, and nobody wants to buy a fake. All right, so check out this auction. Okay, Crescent, a Sunburst auction house rather, out in where are they? They're in Pasadena, California. They're on Live Auctioneers. I assume they're on Invaluable. I haven't looked. And the sale is on on April 20th. But look now, register for the sale. It's well worth it. All right. thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your week. We'll be back with more videos, and we're packing for a trip, getting ready to head out in a couple of days. We leave on Monday next week. So first thing in the morning, we're heading out, and I'll check in while we're there. But for now, find yourself some good books. All right. Bye-bye.